now be live, Chair. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Andy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the June 5th, 2023 Education Policy and Directions Committee meeting. The Greater Victoria School District wishes to recognize and acknowledge the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. Alrighty, so first item, approval of the agenda. Can I get a mover? Moved by Trustee Duncan. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Next item, approval of the minutes. Can I get a mover? Moved by Trustee David. And all those in favor? And that is moved unanimously. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Go ahead, Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just one piece of business, and it was just a request last month for graduation data for alternative education. I'm just wondering if we can get a bit of a timeline on when that is possible to provide the committee.
For sure. Superintendent, do you have a timeline for that?
Thank you, and through the chair and to the chair. We should be able to get that to you. We could certainly get that to you by the in-camera meeting. It's quite likely in-camera information, as the numbers are so small that they wouldn't be masked, or we could wait for September in-camera. I think it's just up to the board as to which year they'd prefer the data on. Right now, it would be last year's graduation information, and as early as we could get this year's, it would be into next year, into next school year.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That really helps. Sounds like we'll discuss it during agenda planning. Yeah, thanks, Superintendent.
Thanks. Alrighty. Is there any other business arising from the minutes? Hearing none, that brings us to presentations to the committee. There are no presentations to the committee tonight. It's going to be a short meeting, y'all. And that takes us to basically our only agenda item for tonight, the FESL memo and presentation. So I'm going to pass it over to the Deputy Superintendent.
And thank you through the chair. Well, this came very, very quickly, and I'm surprised at how little there really is to get through in terms of the conversation I would like to bring to the committee today. Excuse me, having a bit of an allergy thing. I think I may need to take a quick puff of my inhaler, but I think I'm going to give it a minute here.
Not a problem. Does anybody have any good jokes that we can tell while we wait? Okay,
I think I'm good.
Okay.
So really taking a look back at the year in review in terms of what was presented to the committee over the course of the year. I just want to take us back a little bit and start taking a look at each of sort of the big pieces that popped up during, I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to take a quick puff. I'll be right back, okay?
Absolutely, take your time. Weather's gorgeous.
I have heard that the allergy, though, the people are saying it's really bad this year. The pollen count must be really high.
That makes sense.
I took a class of middle schoolers to the park the other day, and I was out of allergy medicine, so I was just sneezing all afternoon, and they were like, "You're sure you're not sick?" I'm like, "No, I'm allergic to grass."
Sorry, Harold, you're muted.
Sorry, folks, I've been good all day. I haven't had an issue, and all of a sudden, I think it's the sunshine. I think it's warmed up my lungs or something. I don't know. Okay, I'll get through. Again, really taking a look first off, Andy, if you could start the slideshow for us, please. Thank you, Andy. So over the course of this year, we've taken a look at obviously the strategic plan and the 3 goals that the board has looked at for the next couple more years from 2020 to 2025. And how we have connected the work of the strategic plan with our framework for enhancing student learning, which is our FESL document. Back in September, the FESL document was presented to the board and was sent off to the ministry for the September 30th deadline. And the other piece that we really tried to connect on as well is looking at the educated citizen through the Ministry of Education and Childcare, and really focusing on the 3 pillars, the intellectual development pillar, the human and social development pillar, and the career development pillar. And we know that through our work, we have to look at all of these different documents that guide the work and supporting students in particular within our district. Andy, if you could go to the next slide. We started off taking a look at our schedule of presentations to Ed Policy going back through September. District staff have provided overviews of some of the areas we have focused on. Over the next 15 minutes or so, I'd like to highlight 1 or 2 key points from each of the presentations as we look to next year and the creation of the 2023 FESL document. Next slide, Andy, please. In October, District Principal Sean Powell and Victor School Principal Nadine Naughton shared the process for school goal development, including the alignment of the goals with the strategic plan, FESL, and Ministry of Education and Childcare requirements. All schools in our district have been focused for the last couple of years really looking at their school, looking at the data that they have in their school, and actually developing schools in consultation with the staff, the students, families, to really have a meaningful conversation about what does a school goal look like, and what are we going to focus on individually as a school, but knowing that we've got these bigger live documents like FESL and the Educated Citizen and our strategic plan. I'm happy to report that by June 1st, all of our schools submitted school goals for the 2023-24 school year. Next slide, Andy, please. District Principal Tammy Renyard and Director of Indigenous Education, Dr. Shelley Nemi, presented on the Educated Citizen and identified the 3 pillars of the Educated Citizen. Also included in this presentation were the announced upcoming ministry changes for September 2023 that included the new reporting order and new Indigenous focused graduation requirements. We know that particularly with our K through grade 9 students, really taking a look at how are we reporting out assessment to families based on the new ministerial order. We have spent much of this year, almost all of this year, really looking at that assessment and that reporting order. And we will have in place all of the requirements for that reporting order in September of 2023 for the next school year. Also taking a look at the Indigenous Ed focused graduation requirement. This will be implemented in September of 2023. And we have had our secondary schools meet specifically for the English Indigenous Ed component and the Social Studies Education Ed component as well. For the 2023-24 school year, the board, through the budget process, has allocated $25,000 towards the Indigenous grad requirement portion. To the next slide, please, Andy. Acting District Principal Charmaine Short highlighted the district's work supporting early learning and childcare, including the early learning framework, Strong Start Centers, Welcome to Kindergarten, and childcare space overview. We know that this has been a large part of the work for Principal Short this year, and we know that moving forward for next year, she will be leading this work in her current position as acting principal, And we know there's a lot more that we as a district will be anticipating as we welcome our early learners and our childcare centers to our district. So we look forward to that work from District Principal Short. Next slide, please, Andy. In January, District Principals David Hovis and Tammy Renyard and Acting District Principal Charmaine Short introduced the literacy framework K-12, including defining literacy and critical thinking as it relates to the ministry's literacy focus. We know this is a big undertaking for our district as well, particularly when we know that the literacy framework is being built, and we do have a plan moving forward to bring the framework in as of September. But there's always more that we will be doing to showcase the need, one, for the work, and the fact that these all of this work is related specifically to our strategic plan, and in particular, the goal 1, which is addressing the inequity of outcomes of diverse learners in literacy, and goal 2, addressing the inequity of outcomes for Indigenous learners in literacy. So again, highlighted focus in these areas for the upcoming school year, and knowing that we will continue to support our schools in this work and in support of literacy throughout the district. Next slide, Andy, please. District Vice Principal Lindsay Johnson provided an overview of pathways and partnerships in February. She shared how engagement in meaningful career education opportunities for students provides many positive outcomes, including helping excite students about subjects, increasing motivation, confidence, and attitudes to learning. We know this is a very big job for the Pathways and Partnerships Department. They take pride in the work that they do, and they consistently show us the data that supports the ongoing learning in this Pathways and Partnership programming. We know that we are making a difference, particularly at our secondary level, but we know also introducing these careers at an early age, particularly at our elementary, middle school levels, we are making inroads in helping develop students in their ambition and in their passion for potential careers as they move through our system. Next slide, please, Andy. District Principal Sean McCartney and Director of Facilities Marnie Verston Harwood presented an historical overview of the Inclusion for Learning strategy in March. In 2018, a base level was established for inclusive learning spaces in each school and the alignment with the ministry's vision of healthy and effective learning environments. All 48 schools in our district have established inclusive learning spaces. Moving forward, an accessibility inventory and a proactive plan will be developed in alignment with the strategic plan, with VESTL, and with student success. And as you saw in their presentation, we took many different spaces within our schools, within the district, and looked at what it would look like for that inclusive space for each school. We know that we have that flexibility, but we also know there are limitations on the size of our buildings and how we have to work together to ensure those inclusive spaces continue as we move and develop the positive learning strategy for all. Next slide, please, Andy. In April, Director of Indigenous Education, Dr. Shelley Nemi, reviewed Goal 2 of the strategic plan and included the work of the 4 houses and the development of the Indigenous Support and Wellness Framework. One of the important pieces, and I really appreciated the work done in this area, looking at that holistic chocolate lily graphic, if you will, that was developed to really express how we've gone from early learning and we work our way up to all of the wellness pieces when we look at all of our students throughout the district, and particularly with that Indigenous lens. That framework that was developed by the Indigenous Ed Department is a framework that is interconnected with our own mental health wellness framework that supports the entire district within Greater Victoria as well. So a lot of work done here to establish that framework, and a lot of work to really integrate the framework so that we have the seamless support system, if you will, for our Indigenous learners and for all learners within our district. Next slide, please, Andy. We know that with priority students, as you saw, you've heard in many times in ed policy presentations this year that this district team goal references priority students. This goal is an attempt to prioritize students who may not have equity of access and opportunity. Priority students can include students of Indigenous ancestry, students with disabilities and diverse abilities, students in care, refugee students, to name a few. However, as we discussed how we define and identify priority students, we know that it's not as simple as focusing on any one trait. Rather, we can use some of this data to identify the students whose stories and experiences we need to surface. In essence, our goal is about supporting school teams to try to better understand and respond to the voices of the students and families we serve. Some of the examples presented in the presentation included district support referrals and person-centered planning, the alternative education at SJ Burnside, the GVSD Welcome Center supporting new families to Canada, and community partners including Vickers, ICA, and the Victoria Immigrant and Refugee Society. We know that this work will continue for the 23-24 school year, and we'll continue to look at data that supports us in showing us how are we doing, how are we meeting the needs of these priority students, and if what we're doing is not being successful, what are those changes that we need to implement to support for future growth in that area. Finally, last slide, please, Andy. Each of the presentations you have seen this year, including references and alignment to the strategic plan, the framework for enhancing student learning, ministry requirements, and the work of staff. We are currently reviewing data, including student learning survey, FSA data, EDI and MDI data, and other data sets to measure our work and frame our next submission for the 2023 FESL document. This document is due September the 30th in 2023, and we will be bringing our document to the board for your approval, and we'll be sending it off to the ministry shortly thereafter. One of the things that I think we all need to keep in mind as we do this work is that there is so much data that we have within our district to support this work, and so many pieces that are from that satellite data way up there all the way down to the street level data. And we know by looking at each of those data sets, we can set the path for accounting for the work we do and supporting the students within our system. The work that we do is keeping the students at the center of the work. And we know that together, that work will only help to improve the outcomes of all students within our district. I thank you for the opportunity to bring this back to you and bring it back to the forefront of our conversation. And I'm open to any questions if there are any out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Superintendent. The floor is open for questions. I saw Trustee Duncan's hand first, and then we'll move over to Tracy.
Hey, hi, thanks, Chair. Thank you very much, Deputy Superintendent Caldwell, for the presentation and the overview of where we've come over the last year in terms of the very first FESL and how the work's evolving. My understanding was that at June Ed Policy, we would have a draft FESL for review and some data. So I'm wondering, I know you mentioned that a draft would come to the board in September. I know last year it was challenging because it was brand new and the board essentially was signing off on a FESL the same month that it received it. And so my understanding was that this year we're going to try to work toward having a draft in June so that there was time to kind of consider and feedback and well, before that September deadline. So yeah, so I guess I'm wondering in terms of timeline, how do you foresee the feedback coming from, well, from the board in particular between now and September? And then I just had a question about data, but I will come back to that.
Yep, through the chair, we continue to work on the draft currently. It's not ready for the board. We will be providing that early September. It will be available at the end of June, and more than likely we'd be able to set it out earlier in the early part of July to the board.
Thank you so much. Nicole, did you also have a question about data?
I did, but I'll wait until
Sure
others
thing.
have had a chance.
Absolutely. Tracy, you have the floor.
Hey, my question is also about data. So thank you very much for the review, Harold. I mean, it was quick, but it was very helpful for me because I think I might have missed one or two of those meetings. So it was great to see kind of what had been talked about. And I just kind of hit that end point as well in talking about pulling together data points to develop your next vessel, and that the student learning survey and the parent survey always kind of stand out for me because at the ministry level, at least, it's very, very low uptake from families of kids with disabilities and from disabled students themselves. So I don't know what that translates to on a district level and how your responses are there, but I'm just a little concerned that you might not be getting the feedback that you need based on what I know is happening at the provincial level. So just something I wanted to mention. And I think, I actually met with Sean McCartney today, which was lovely, and saw you this morning very briefly. And we did talk about, different projects about, collecting data within the district as well. So that's, future, but it won't help you necessarily for this one. So I don't know if it's a question or just more a comment, but thanks.
Through the chair, appreciate the comments as well, Tracy. I do know that we're not just relying on that satellite data that way up there. We are looking at that street data where we have that individual data coming from schools, where that relationship with family is. So we're not relying on one thing. We are looking at multiple levels of data to support that planning.
Thank you so much. Tracy, do you feel like I guess it was more of a comment question?
Probably. Yeah, it's fine. We'll just see how it comes out going forward. I'm just, I have concerns that you won't have the information from those kids. That's really what it comes down to. Yeah.
Trustee Kwan, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, Deputy Superintendent, I wanted to send my appreciation for you offering to have that vessel report out at the beginning of July. I know I, for one, would probably appreciate some time to look over it. So I really do appreciate the time that you would give us to look over that and be able to read it through and make sense of it in our own minds. Some of us have been out of this or have not been in it for a long time, so probably some time to go through it would be welcome. But that's really not what my question was. I just wanted to say thank you for offering that. My question actually was, I wondered if you had any. Thank you again for including some of the Indigenous grad requirements, Indigenous education grad requirements in your presentation. And I just wondered if you could elaborate on that at all. First of all, how I know, I think Associate Superintendent Arts had mentioned that you had a Pro D Day, I think in May. And I know we did the film festival and the storytelling, which was amazing. And I wondered if anything came out of that Pro D that you could share. And also if you could elaborate a little bit on how that I think you said $25,000, and gosh, that was not too long ago. I should remember that. But I just wondered how that was being used to provide those courses. I know, resources are hard to come by, especially for those kind of courses. And so I wondered kind of, how that money was going to be distributed and used, and whether we had any thoughts on resources for those courses and that kind of thing. If you have any information to share.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes. First off, the ministry did sponsor a day for the Indigenous Ed grad requirement for teachers that were predominantly teaching the English component of that course. But we also know there's a social studies component as well. And you're referring to our Pro D in May, on May the 18th, where we did sponsor an afternoon session for social studies teachers in particular, but for all that wanted to participate in that session. So it was open to all, really. So that did happen. With the $25,000, what we're looking at is we'll get some input from the GVTA through JCCI committee. What they've really been asking for is release time for teachers of social studies of English to support the development of the course for next year. And so we will be meeting, Lena is here on the committee meeting today as well. We'll be meeting with JCCI on Thursday. And at that time, we'll just talk about, well, there's the 25,000, and now it's, how do we want to plan it? How much of that amount will go into release time for teachers to work collaboratively together, and how much of that will go for resources that are potentially needed? Now, you need to know, again, 25,000 is not a lot of money. However, what we do know is that as of September, the teachers will be teaching it. So we're hopeful that this release time will support each of those teachers with that collaborative approach to developing and teaching new courses, as well as coming up with those resources that are potentially needed throughout the district as well.
Thanks so much for that. And Trustee Duncan, did you still have your data question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So my question was around, well, two things. I guess first, the analysis of the data that we have so far. And again, just wanting to kind of have a better understanding of when that will be coming to the board. So again, obviously we haven't done our agenda setting for June in camera board. So some of the data I suspect will be discussed in camera, especially if it's small numbers. But for the remaining data that will certainly be used in terms of our analysis of how we've done this year and where we're still developing and need to focus for next school year, whether that's EDI data, MDI data, aspects of the McCreary data that we can get information from. Because I'm thinking back to our last FESL, and one of the areas or goals that we had was to, I think it was something like increasing our students' success in on track and extending by like 2%. And so I'm wondering, whether we know already whether we're there or when we will know. And then, just in general, in terms of timetabling and ensuring that there's enough time to digest the data and really bring it back and use it as to guide our discussion of the draft FESL. Any kind of insights from staff about how that is going to look process-wise and timetable-wise would be helpful. And then the only other thing I wanted to ask that's data related was just around school goals. So I wanted to pause and just acknowledge the work that's gone into ensuring that each school has school goals. And I'm really grateful to everybody that's fed into that, both at the district level and the school-based level. And again, in terms of that work, the requirement is in the School Act, and what the School Act tells us is that the board needs to approve goals for each school. And so I'm wondering again, in addition to the board's involvement in approving those goals, the other thing that the School Act speaks to is that the school goals be accessible to both students and parents. So I'm just wondering if we can get a little bit of some context provided about how those school goals are going to be rolled out at the school level and accessible, and also what the board's involvement will be moving forward. So sorry, I know that's a lot. I can break it down if needed.
Go ahead, Superintendent.
Thank you. If I may, I'll start and welcome collaborative discussion, but some great questions, Chair Duncan. A few things to share. The FESL from this year was returned to us after we submitted it to the ministry. We received the feedback last week. So we're recognizing that it is a tight timeline to receive the feedback. We have areas that we comment on based on the feedback, and that is due June 16th. So we get it back last week. We have feedback that is due the 16th. And then we look to, based on the feedback and what we know of the data, rewrite or write again the new FESL for next year. And so the goal is, as Deputy Superintendent Caldwell said, we're going to do that over the next 3 weeks. We'll look to try and have the draft FESL out to board beginning of July. We also, as we've talked about, school goals have been submitted. Those were due on the 1st of June as we work through a very long process of ensuring that it was a collaborative piece. And those were based also on data that they had both at the street level and at the district and provincial level. Those school goals will be presented to board in September, and hopefully our plan is ed policy. And then those will be ensured to be up on school websites so that access to them can be seen, and they're very front on the website. So it's kind of this cycle of getting feedback, getting it back, looking at data and getting it out as quickly as it can. But I think that's the unroll or the how we move forward with this plan. And at the same time, in the probably September ed policy would be again looking at the draft with the goal of having it signed off by the end of September. So it'll give a bit of the summer for people to read through it and give any feedback that they want. It will still come to ed policy in September, just again as a more formal committee structure.
Thank you.
And just to add to that, Nicole, the other pieces of data, all of it seems to be coming in right now. So our MDI, EDI data, it's all new. Our McCreary data, we still haven't received that yet, but it should be any day now. So we're all just a little bit off in terms of receiving data and actually being able to take a look at it and to have those conversations of where now and what are the next steps.
That's great. Appreciate the context and an idea of what we're going to see timetable wise. So that's great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Does anybody have any further? Oh, go ahead, Trustee Painter.
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of a roundabout one, and I apologize that I'm scrambling through the FESL report itself right now. With respect to literacy is obviously a topic that is very important for us. We put a fair bit of effort into it in the last couple of years. And one of the things I'm interested in is school level reporting on just how we're doing. I know that there's different approaches underway across the district for literacy. I think it would be helpful for me to understand how we're doing to be able to understand at a grade level how effective we are right now with the number of students who are meeting or exceeding versus not yet meeting expectations or whatever the current terminology is. My reason for asking about that in particular is that FSAs continue to be a bit of a hit or miss for us in the district and don't really provide us with a comprehensive assessment of how we're doing across the district, and specifically uptake is different in different schools. And it just strikes me that where we do have universal results for all students, that we should be making the most of that data to really inform us about just how effective our approaches are. Thank you. If there was a question in there, it was basically, are we looking at alternatives to FSA and the higher level, ministry level assessment of performance?
Go ahead, Superintendent.
I can answer a bit for you, Trustee Painter. We have had conversations with District Principal Hovis around what type of grade-wide writing literacy assessments we can do that are not just FSA, is to rely heavily on FSA data doesn't necessarily speak the full picture of our student achievement. I think where we're looking at now is a standardized assessment that is perhaps grade 3, 6, and 9. As we know, literacy assessment happens in grade 10 and 12 with the provincial. The other part is when we're looking at literacy, as you have mentioned, different schools have different focus areas. And so some may be looking at it through one lens and another school is looking at it through a different. So it's just trying to match where they're at in their continuum and not over prescribe the literacy assessment that we have. So again, I think it would be very beneficial to have District Principal Hovis sort of speak about what the plan is and where we're meeting the needs of students in the schools, mostly around like tier 1 and tier 2 supports. And then what are we doing for all of the students in tier 3? So he's probably the best person to come forward and speak about it, but we definitely have had conversations about what are we looking at beyond FSA data to let us know if these supports and services and structures are working.
If I may, Chair, to the superintendent, thank you very much. I really appreciate that that context. My interest isn't so much in, and perhaps I gave the wrong impression by the way I phrased it, but my intention wasn't about trying to dictate a specific methodology. Like, it'd be really nice for comparison purposes if we were, but I understand that there are different needs and different approaches, and I'm completely willing to work with that. What I am interested in is understanding how the schools are doing. And my ed struck me as, you know, the basic year-end results is because we're already achieving them. I was thinking it might not take too much effort to basically summarize those out so that we can actually look at how different schools are operating and get an appreciation for how their approach is the one that is best suited for the community, just to better understand how we're going about this important task. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying.
And I also see Trustee Kwan's hand.
Yeah, me again. I actually, it kind of triggered when we were talking about the Indigenous grad requirements. I know at one point, I believe Dr. Shelley Nimi had said that she could come to an ed policy meeting and talk a little bit about the trip. I think that some of them took to New Zealand and some of the stuff that they heard and learned while on that trip. And I just wondered if we had plans when that was going to come, and whether I'm just getting ahead of myself and getting excited, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I'm wondering if anybody can speak to whether Dr. Nimi would be able to attend our next ed policy meeting, perhaps.
And through the chair, we can certainly reach out to her. That would be September ed policy, I assume.
Yeah.
Okay.
Trustee Kwan, does that satisfy your? Okay, excellent. I'm wondering if there are any further questions or comments tonight. Go ahead, Trustee Duncan.
Just one brief comment, just going back to assessment. I had the opportunity to at a recent function to raise directly with one of the ministry teams that does a lot of their data analytics, whether they had ever considered comparing the reporting data that's just done every term, 3 times a year, in respect to literacy and numeracy, against the FSA literacy and numeracy data, to glean some kind of appreciation for the extent to which the outcomes deviate. And I haven't heard back, but I did get an informal commitment to come back to me on that. They hadn't thought of that, but I just would be very interested to know whether the, just the reporting we do every year, whether that the outcomes differ significantly from the FSA results. So just wanted to share that.
If no one is able to speak to that for now, we can last call for questions. All right, hearing none, that takes us to the next agenda item, which is adjournment. Very short agenda tonight. Would somebody like to move for us to adjourn? Moved by Trustee Duncan. All those in favor? We are